Michelle, you can't be yawning. We're supposed to do an Ojibos conversation.
What time is it?
No,
Am I awake?
no, I don't know.
I
It's
thought, like,
okay.
some
I noticed how
narcoleptic,
I
I
started
like
the
couldn't
recording
fall
after
asleep, wake
I
up,
yawned. Yeah, that's
fall
right.
asleep
So,
again, wake back up again.
yeah, it's fine. Well, when you have 3 kids, night, day, morning, it's all the same. 2014,
Dreaming,
2021.
sleeping,
It's all the same. It's all the
awake.
same. But we were going to talk about a formula for disaster because everyone wants to know a formula for disaster. Who doesn't want disaster in their life? Just a little energy, a little excitement.
This one's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna love it.
Yeah, a formula for disaster. Which basically, it's this. The formula is the following: if we cared about X, we would have done Y. It's to assume that what people care about and what people value based upon their actions. So if you cared about X, you would have done Y.
Yeah, man, that's.
It destroys relationships left and right, baby.
Yeah, if you cared about X, you would have done Y.
Yeah, like if you cared about the kids, you would have, taken them to the park this afternoon. If you cared about keeping the house clean, you would have vacuumed the living room. If you cared about X, you would have done Y. And therefore now, because, I feel as if you failed to prove to me you cared about X by doing Y, I have something to hold over you. I feel justified to believe you don't care about something, and I believe I have evidence to determine your values. And there's nothing that hurts somebody quicker than feeling like people are attacking their values.
Oh yeah, well, and I think it just sets fire to relationships. It's just I think it's something that just erodes it so quickly.
Oh yeah.
And this is the thing that's so dangerous about it is that this formula though is chock full of all of the feel good. And the valuation we like to value things and we like others to know that we value them. So I think that the particularly dangerous aspect of this formula for disaster is that it sounds right, it sounds good.
Yeah,
it sounds good to say, like, well, if you care about it, just kind of like, well, obviously if I care about, I don't know, making breakfast, I'll make it, right? Like I would make it because I care to do so.
Right.
And see, there's something that, again, it's very much like a feel good kind of language of like,
sure,
if you care, well, who doesn't care? Why wouldn't you care?
Right.
Of course I care.
Right.
Of course I would do that because of course I care.
Right.
Now I think people who maybe are people pleasers might feel more.
Sure.
Like feel good about this idea of like, I want to show you that I care, whereas like somebody who's like is not as bent on that exactly, might be like recognize the pitfall of it more quickly.
Sure.
But basically that's the problem. The problem is that it doesn't seem like a problem.
Oh no, it seems like an ironclad logic.
Exactly. It's like exactly, and I mean that line is so good about like the ironclad logic. It's like, it's almost like you'd be stupid not to accept or understand that that's how it is.
Well, that's why it's so prevalent and disastrous.
And that's what's so dangerous. It's just like a, this metal gavel. It's just something smashing away. And I think something that the one of the reasons why it's so problematic though is like you said, when you're made to feel like you don't care and you do care. It's there's just something so demoralizing about that. And also, you almost then are like put in a place of
having to
feeling
prove.
You constantly have to prove, and then because it's already been levied on you, you can almost never prove it because even if you do it, you only did it because the person said something.
Yes, that's right.
And it's very.
And then they feel like, and then they'll keep saying something, because to make sure you keep doing it, and then you'll feel more hurt, and it becomes a vicious cycle, and then one party feels like, why do I have to keep telling them to do, in order to get them to do it, and then if they stop in one area, they'll start doing it in another area, and it's a snake eating its tail. Yeah,
100%. And I think there's, there's questions about like how, obviously in relationships, because it's a dynamic of two people, two or more people, but in family relationships, etc. But I think that the rubrics here can really help somebody understand how to navigate, how to not have this formula of disaster playing out throughout all their relationships.
Oh yeah.
But then also, it's kind of like, well, let's say it's a goal that would be, a goal that somebody desires or would like to see happen.
Yes.
How do you go about achieving that without, again, putting this, if you cared about X, you would do Y?
Oh yeah, and you see,
it's not so much the problem that we want to see why done necessarily. It's the making the person feel, or just basically telling them they don't care.
Yes.
Even if you're right that the person doesn't care, okay?
Sure.
It is not going to accomplish anything to make them feel like they don't care, or make them feel like you think they don't care.
Oh yeah.
So how do you, in a way, kind of, even if they don't care, how do you make them care?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, why not think about it that way instead?
Right.
Well, okay, maybe they don't care about, I don't know, brushing their hair. I was just going to make up some random example, taking care of their hair, or brushing their hair in the morning, or whatever. Well, instead of saying, if you really cared about your hair, you would brush it every day,
Right.
Well, instead, like, how can you maybe make them want to care about that?
Yeah, see a vision that attracts them to an alternative.
And the thing is, though, that would often be skin in the game for you.
That's correct.
And it's like, how do you participate? Is there something that's a participation for both people?
That's right.
Where it requires something of the demander, or the person making this claim.
Yes.
It requires something of them.
Absolutely. Well, and that's one of the reasons why the formula is so tempting, is because I can put all of the responsibility and problem on another person, and I don't have to do anything myself. It's also very problematic, because if I say, if you loved me, you'd clean the house. None of that follows. There's no laws in the nature of reality that says one of whom loves you cleans your house.
It's not a natural consequence.
No, it's not. No, you decide it is, and then you act as if it's self-evident. Yeah. And you fill in those variables of X and Y, but the structure remains the same, and it brings about a sort of sense of self-evidentness, and it puts a massive burden on other people. If you cared about the family, you would take everyone to the park. Or whatever. It's like, well, why should taking someone to the park? Maybe you go to the park and there's a bunch of mosquitoes and everyone's miserable and none of the kids like the park. Why would that even follow? But maybe in your head it all makes sense. Yeah. Now, of course, the problem is there's some truth to the idea that if somebody loved you, they, for example, would not throw something at you, like a sharp object or whatever. There's some levels of truth to it, but usually when the formula applies, it applies in such general and truly obvious ways that it's just like stating that gravity exists or something. Yeah. It's when you start getting into where you're customizing the formula relative to your own principles and ideas that you get all the trouble. And then, of course, it really hurts. It really hurts the other person, because you're basically saying, you don't love me. You have not had breakfast with me, therefore you don't love me. Yeah, and you see, the other big problem with it is if I set a standard that says, if you love me, you'd make me breakfast. Well, now you have to do that literally every single morning forever. Because are there no bounds to your love? Shouldn't you do it every single day if love is love? So it's an endless thing, and if you skip one day, now you've stepped on an eggshell, you've done something wrong, and now there's going to be a lot of trouble. And so everything becomes nervous, everything becomes anxious written all the time, and people are not happy.
Right, and this, I was reading just a little bit of Ironclad this afternoon, but he was talking about just about this idea of like being fast after what's inside of yourself, and basically like loving that beyond anything else. And there's something actually I think very important to what he's getting at for this discussion, because as I was sitting here listening to you talk, I was thinking about, again, don't you sometimes it's like, well, it's natural to want to be shown love, right?
Sure.
But also it's like a lot of times I think we do that because it's almost like we feel lacking a little bit.
Sure.
It's like we want it to be proved to ourselves that we are worthy.
There's an insecurity.
It's an insecurity. So it's like, well, look, I think understanding and valuing your own self is very important, and actually can give you a lot of confidence, and not having all of these things that need to be proven to you by those around you.
Oh, well, we learn in science that verification is impossible, but people are, that you can only get falsification, but these people are having relationships where it's endless verification. Right. And you can never have enough verification.
Exactly. And that's a great point, where it's, if your love will know no end, well then what wouldn't you do? What could, yes. And it should be everything all the time,
yes.
And there is something about how, when you have that, I think the confidence really that can come from an understanding that you are valuable as a human being. Do you value yourself? Right. That you don't then require everyone around you to, show that, you're worthy of it. So I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do that for you. I'm going to do this for you.
Sure.
There's not, you start to have like less of the expectation. Now, I think that in today's language, I think that can almost feel like, oh, well, you should be able to expect things, from other people. And obviously there's going to just be natural expectations that are met and given and received and given in relationships. It's just very natural in marriage and family and in even friendships. But I think this formula though of expectation is where the danger comes in.
Oh sure.
And where, again, if you have that self-evaluation, you're not as hang-bent on seeing these constant proofs of love.
Well,
right?
one, valid expectation. The likelihood of this formula using this formula helping you determine good expectations is extremely low. Basically, the paper is arguing that this formula should not exist in your life. You get rid of it. Like, don't be using any structure of if X. Then like if you say if you love me, then you would have taken me out to eat. Any of that form, that argumentative form, should be abandoned. And then you can start to determine, if you get that out of your head, then you can start to determine like valid ideas or valid points. And you also do it differently. Instead of coming up to someone and, instead of coming up to your husband or wife and saying, if you love me, you'd clean the house, you instead say something like this. You say, we need to get the house clean. Would you mind to do it this afternoon? And you have a discussion to get the job done, as opposed to attacking people's values. Exactly. You can get the same thing accomplished, just not by taking stabs at their soul. Really? Like, I know. I thought I had to stab at souls to get ice cream.
That's not a good approach.
That is not. It's extraordinary. But there's something where it's almost like you want the relationship to stay in this emotion realm, this emotion and feeling dimension, and it's like you don't want to bring it down just to the crude praxis of how to get things done.
Right, well, exactly.
Because it's like more lovey to keep it in the emotion realm, but actually it just makes it more painful.
Exactly.
Because the thing is that the formula does not take into account. It's like, if you love the family, take us to the park. It's like, well, I actually have to work from 4 to 8 and I'll get fired if I don't. Like, the formula often disregards how life is a series of trade-offs. Right. Like, you have limited time, you have to choose between cleaning the garage, going to work, and playing with the kids. You can't do all. So if the husband is like, if you love me, you clean the garage. If you love me, you would, make money, bring home money. And if you love me, you take care of the kids. Well, guess what? All 3 of those are not easy to do. And very often people will use this formula simultaneously, well, in multiple ways, all at the same time, that are very difficult to get all done in one day. And so everyone always feels... So this is what ends up happening. Then all the parties in the relationship feel like they're failing. They feel like they're 100%. Falling behind, and they feel hurt. Then everyone feels like a victim.
Yep.
And once everyone feels like a victim, it's pretty much game over. Then you get that distancing, that feeling of you can't even talk about it with being attacked, because once you talk about it, the other party just brings up how they're hurt, and it's the 2 porcupines getting closer, and it's game over. Yeah. And, it doesn't have to be game over, but it's going to be game hard. Game hard. So it's a terrible formula, and there's just no need to use it, because you can accomplish the same ends without using it.
Well, see, to say that the formula, if you loved me, you would bring me coffee every morning, make me coffee every morning. To say that formula is very dangerous and bad and wrong and should be out of your mindset is not to say that it's wrong to ask your partner or your husband to bring you coffee in the morning. Like this is not, it's not being said that like you can't have any valid wants or needs. No. Yes. The point is how.
Yes, the how.
How are you going to ask that of your loved one? How are you going to go about doing that? And it's just so fascinating, because I think there's something extremely very unconstructive. This is a word, probably not.
Sure. Sounds
it's
good.
Not.
We'll unconstruct it later. Okay. We're unconstructed if it's not. Don't worry.
Great. But there's something that's just very, like you're saying, very fluffy about if you cared about this, you would do Y. It's like, that's so vague. Like, it's, and again, people think it's ironclad, so they think it's very clear. Well, yes, if you started caring, you would just start making me coffee. Yes. Okay, but one, you've demoralized the person. Yes. Now they're going to be feeling like it's a chore. Yeah. Or if they don't do it, then the person will think they really don't love you, because now we've talked about it, now I won't do it. Yes. So it's like, it's just bad news bears. It's just bad news bears, and it's like I
Yeah,
think
because why not orange juice? Why coffee? Why not like a foot massage? Like why coffee? Like it's so self-evident to the
Right.
person using it, but it could easily be other things. And it also probably does
Yeah.
not take into account the fact that the person is not making you coffee every morning because they're running to a job they don't like to do in order to take care of the family, or because they're going out to cut the grass. You know, there's probably other factors going on. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a conversation on how to balance those factors or different things. Just don't attack their soul.
Right.
This tendency to attack people's soul. And I think people do it because you feel like if I attack your soul, then it's really more likely I'll get my way.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, the thing is too, it's I think the beautiful thing about the directness of like, hey, you know, I need you to do this, or I want you to bring me coffee every Saturday morning.
Yes.
The great thing is like, because what's not being said there, but what's so beautiful about it is because I know you care.
Yes.
And I can ask you, and I don't have to be afraid of my, you know, that like, that somehow you're not going to withhold on me or whatever. It's like, because you care and because I care about you, we will do things for each other.
Yeah, the caring is assumed in the structure of the question.
Exactly. And so like, you know, when you can ask or bring certain something in a very, if you bring it out very clearly, the beautiful thing is that the assumption there is the care, is the, you know, we do things for one another.
Where in the formula for disaster, the assumption is you don't care. So the orientation,
that's pretty much, it's just the assumption that somebody doesn't care. Making somebody feel like they don't care destroys them, and will destroy you, and will destroy everything.
Because they start wondering, what else am I doing wrong?
Exactly.
Then they become a paranoid crazy person, because it's like, you know, what other ways am I letting them down?
Right.
Because the other thing too, you destroy the environment of trust, because what you're saying is for some unknown amount of time, maybe for years up to this point, you have failed to make me feel loved, and so it makes it makes everything in the past feel like an illusion. It makes everything in the past come into question. And then, of course, as you move forward, you wonder about whatever new present you go into and the reality of it. Everything becomes questionable. The reality of everything, it's like the ground under your feet begins to move, and it's unnerving.
People show care in different ways, too.
Yes.
You know, and that's a really, really, really important thing to recognize. Oh, yeah. And it's almost like we just want to find, like, affirmation and need like and fulfillment and all of that is so vast, and then we just like kind of place it all on top of another person. That's just impossible. It's impossible to do that, and yet we do it. People do it all the time, and this formula is an example of that. Because I think it's really putting this, it's like a blank check of if you loved me you would do Y, if you loved me you would do Y. Blank check, like, well, okay, well, now what? Like, you're saying sky's the limit. Well, if love knows no bounds, should be doing it all. I should be doing who knows? I think there's a mind-reading aspect to it, too.
Oh, yeah. There's something in us
there's something that just wants to be known without the work of being known, almost. It's like we want to be known fully,
we think it's more
completely.
intimate. We think it's more intimate. It's a sign of higher intimacy if you know what I want without me having to tell you.
Right, and if
it's
you
also
don't know
a sign of
impossible. Then you don't care.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
It's like no. Instead of assuming the person does care, they might not know, however, that you need this or you want this, and so. You're right though. It's weird. It's like we really are so adverse to just the practical, you know, putting in request or like
to practically figure out how to get it done. We don't want to do that. We want to romanticize it, and ironically, that hurts romance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I mean, if you just and perhaps one of the problems is it's you know, one is seeking God. You know, God knows you without speaking, but you want that divine relationship with a partner, so you want them to know what you're thinking without telling them. But that is disregarding one's fallenness, and you know, you're putting on people. You're asking people to be God when they cannot be God. And yes, no, it's a huge problem. This tendency is like we don't want to make it just practical. We want to put it in languages of romance or have an emotional layer to it, when everything is so much simpler to just say, hey, I would like coffee this morning, can you make it? As opposed to saying, if you loved me, there would have been coffee waiting for me this morning. The second is poison, destruction, and it's like the quickest way to destroy a relationship. And you would have gotten the coffee with the first one. You know, the second one is risking everything for coffee, and you could have gotten the coffee without the risk. It's just a really bad investment strategy. It just does not make sense, but there's something in us that wants to use it, and perhaps it's because we're all wounded, we're all hurt, and we want to share, spread that wounded and hurt onto other people, because we feel like, well, they'll help me bear it, but really the metaphor, it's more like a virus, it just spreads, it doesn't make it better, and then also we've been led to believe, maybe from our movies and our shows or whatever, that mind reading is the ultra sign of intimacy, so that we expect that, but we also want them to mind read that they should mind read. So there's like a meta layer to it, and it gets worse and worse, and it's a formula for disaster, and disaster does come.
Well, and I think too, when I was thinking about why this, the hurts and the insecurities for why people end up doing this, it's almost like, especially when it comes to marriage, you're blending two whole different people and different, family cultures. Exactly. And, it's like you want to feel like, it's kind of like there's almost something, again, like you almost want the maternal paternal aspect, or your family culture, which knew and did certain rituals and rhythms and practices givens exactly, where like that's always what would happen, and my mom would always know how to do this, and she always would, just the little things that you just you were just happy, and they were just home, and you want that feeling again. You want to feel at home. You want to feel home. You want the givens, and it's like that there are. It's a very big. I think there's a huge adjustment being made, especially in marriage, where you're like, oh, dang, I'm the adult. First of all, Second of all, this person has not known me for over 2 decades or whatever. And so it's just it's a
the givens have to be the givens
aren't
there, but we want them to be there. We want to skip the work.
We want them to be there without actually developing what those givens are. And that development is going to have to be a verbal. Just very practical kind of exchange.
Well, when you're a child, your parents already did the work, or hopefully did the work, if it's a healthy environment of creating givens. So you come into the world, sort of just, your phenomenological experience is that they're just there.
Exactly.
Just there.
Yes.
And then you get into a relationship, and it turns out that they're not just there. But you want them to just be there, because all of your experiences made them there. That givenness, that silent understanding, that non-verbal exchange where things just happen. So then when it's not there, you say, well, it must be because they don't love me right. It must be because they're doing something wrong.
It's so funny. Isn't it funny, though? Because we say, like, this formula says, like, if you cared about me, you would do, again, like the coffee example, you'd make me coffee every morning or whatever. Well, it's funny, though, because what's almost more real to that statement is, if you knew me for 2 decades and were my mom, you would make me coffee every morning.
That's it. So everyone listen to this.
You'd make me breakfast every morning or something.
Every time the formula is coming out of your mouth, be sure, instead of saying, if you love me, you clean the house, make sure to change it to if you had known me for 2 decades and were my mom, you would clean the house. And the formula will leave your relationship instantly.
That's it.
Unless you're talking to your mom. Unless you're talking to your mom. And your mom's going to be like, why are you still in this house? You are 20, you are over 20. You need to go and make your own coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an OG Rose conversation. Thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate it. You can visit the website, Facebook, Instagram.
www.ogrose.com.
Yes, Michelle does a wonderful job on the Instagram. I do not. And you can see pictures of our children, who are beautiful and wonderful. And we try to update that every day.
Yes.
Meaning Michelle tries to update it every day because I'm terrible at these things.
Because I won't touch the thing with the 10-foot pole.
No, because I'm awful. I am awful. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I am awful.
If you get closer, you just scream.
No, it's like that scream painting. It's really bad.
Yeah, that's you.
But that is me. It's quite terrible. Social media, I can't tell you. But anyway, thank you everyone for your time. We appreciate it. And have a great night.